She was asking if she could do an audio earbuds, and I said, no, you can't, because there's too much of a risk of a feedback loop. If she keeps them in, yeah. Anna, if you keep your earbuds in and keep your microphone muted, you should be able to listen. So you can join audio, keep your microphone muted, and only listen on your earbuds. Good morning. Oh, hi. I'm sorry? No, I'm not. I'm not. Is Gabe up there with you? Nick? There's the CCAC AV staff are up in the booth. I'm not sure. What do you need help with? Oh, is there? Okay. Ask if he was wondering if there's a computer lab where he could like go check email. Anna Caesar says hi. Good morning. This is a sound check from Pittsburgh for LSIC Day 2, October 11, 2023. Check 1, 2, 3. Test 1, 2, 3. Oh, Cheryl has said hi. Cheryl Williams says hi, Anna. All right, got it. So you guys good upstairs? Sounding good for you? Okay, we are good. Thank you. Show will start. Program will start about 9:30.
I haven't tried any email from creating.
But she said they were here at their meeting. Virtually got all of that. So maybe.
Do we have a non-sensitive clicker for today? Good, good. As it should be. Wait.
Yeah. They threw them
I
away.
did, yeah.
Okay.
Okay. I just turned it on.
Oh, this is a new one.
As a new clicker,
Okay,
it's less sensitive because there's literally just a, it's not like we're.
That's
on
better.
videos. Are we live?
Hi, Ray.
Where's the mic?
I mean, it's like short on the front. Yeah, we need a break. You're welcome. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. Hello. Hello. All right, we'll be getting started in a few minutes. So please come in. Remember, no food or drink in the auditorium. Water is fine. But there's plenty of space and the viewing capability outside as well if you still want to have breakfast out there. But we'll be getting started in a minute or two. Okay, hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Lunar Surface Innovation Consortium, the fall meeting. My name is Josh Cahill. I'm the Deputy Director of LSIC. First, to get you oriented again, so I think everybody knows where the bathrooms are, right outside the door. Remember, we can't have food and drink in the auditorium. If you're allowed to have water, but if you have food or drink, we've been asked by CCAC to take it outside. You still can view the meeting from out there. Those of you who have gotten lunch, you still need to go to check in and get your lunch tickets for today. So if you haven't done that, you'll need to go to registration to get your lunch ticket. They are an indicator of what you will be getting and what you have ordered. A couple other things. So reminders. So the Caterpillar mobile control station is out in the canteen. I think the current winning time is about 2 minutes and 30 seconds, 2:45. It's basically a telerobotic apparatus that you're actually operating equipment down in North Carolina with some of their larger scale equipment. Don't worry, there is somebody there to press a button if you're about to run off the course and say stop. But I think the current winner is potentially a ringer. So we'll have to see who else can match that time. I haven't done it yet, but I'm pretty sure. I hope they're not keeping track of the slow times because that might be me. Again, we'll have moonshot tours again today. happening throughout the day, particularly at noon. Those of you who signed up for the CMU Carnegie Mellon tour at 5:30, the bus will be out front. You have to check in to make sure you can go. If you have signed up, please show up. Okay. If you need to back out, please let us know. We have a wait list for that. If you want to hang around and make sure that it is indeed full, you may do that, but we can't guarantee you'll be able to get in. Again, so we mentioned this in the physical program, but I failed to mention it on the digital online. GatherTown for virtual participants. The GatherTown poster session will be at 1:30 p.m. So for those who actually want to join in to take a look at our virtual poster providers. Again, we wanted to say a quick thank you to CCAC and our partners, Astrobotic and Moonshot Museum, Keystone Space Collaborative, and Caterpillar as well. How did everybody like the Moonshot Museum last night? Was that pretty good? I was told, yes, thank you. So I was promised Moonshot whiskey, but apparently it was very popular and sold out. But it all goes to the museum. So it was a good thing that it sold out. Unfortunately, we'll have to wait for another time. Okay, so I also like to recognize our sponsors, Honeybee Robotics and Oak Moss. They've helped support some students here. And with that, I think we'll get started. Our first speaker is Congressman Matt Cartwright. He's provided us a video. He's the U.S. Representative of Pennsylvania's 8th Congressional District. He's a senior member of the House Appropriations Committee. He leads the Commerce, Justice, and Science Subcommittee, and he's part of the Financial Services and General Government Appropriations Subcommittee. Without further ado.
Well, good morning, everybody. I'm delighted for this opportunity to address all of you attending the Lunar Surface Innovation Consortium at the Community College of Allegheny County. I'm Congressman Matt Cartwright, and I'd like to recognize the diverse group of participants in Pittsburgh today, including NASA, the U.S. government, key industry players, academia, nonprofits, and students as well. And although I can't be there in person with you, know that I am with you all in spirit. You know, in the past, when Americans thought of cities significant to the space race, they tended to lean toward Houston or Cape Canaveral. Not anymore. Pittsburgh's long-running shift from the industrial steel city to a technological hub is heading in a new direction toward outer space. Pittsburgh's technology community is thriving and transforming into a region where robotics, material science, engineering, and advanced manufacturing are coming together. The important and impressive work that you are all doing is feeding in to the nation's greater goals of collaboration, innovation, and tech development. Your collective efforts are also fundamental to supporting our nation's aspiration of returning to the moon. Now, a few of the Pittsburgh projects that are already contributing to our country's lunar ambitions include NASA's breakthrough distributed power architecture for in situ lunar missions, partially funded by the University of Pittsburgh campus, and NASA's vertical solar array technology, VSAT project, where Astrobotic is actively involved. Now, I want to tell you, it's important to say, and it's not just prime companies like Astrobotic that are benefiting from the sharpened focus on the space industry. Astrobotic works with more than 150 suppliers throughout Pennsylvania and relies on builders, engineers, and a variety of other workers to provide the parts, expertise to make advanced lunar missions possible. This new space race fuels our economy, builds wealth, and inspires and attracts the next generation of American STEM talent. We need it. I can tell you, as ranking member of the Commerce, Justice, and Science Appropriations Subcommittee of the U.S. House. I want to assure you that we will continue to provide a strong level of resources to NASA in fiscal year 2024 and beyond. That includes, of course, the Artemis program to return American astronauts to the lunar surface for the first time in more than half a century. And I'm proud to say that in my role as CJS chairman last Congress, we delivered a budget of more than $25 billion for NASA for FY23, including funding for the spacecraft, propulsion rockets, and other technology needed for our astronauts to set foot on the south pole of the moon for the coming years. We all know that space exploration plays a critical role in our country's security and our country's prosperity. I'm committed to upholding the important legacy of keeping America first when it comes to the space industry. So in closing, I'd like to congratulate the Lunar Surface Innovation Consortium for building an impressive coalition that engages constituents in the greater Pittsburgh area and across the whole of our country. I'd also like to thank the event's organizing partner, the Keystone Space Collaborative, for supporting and serving the growing space industry in our tri-state region. Your ongoing efforts are critical to our cause, and I'd like to acknowledge also the contributions of the Moonshot Museum for playing a vital role in inspiring future generations and advancing the lunar exploration. Your living lab is educating and motivating our young people to find their place in the future space exploration. It's an honor to appear today in any form, so I say thank you for your outstanding efforts. Outer space is now closer than it ever was before. Thanks so much.
Okay, thank you. So up next, we're going to move on into our next speaker. He's from Astrobotic. Is he here? John Thornton? Oh, great. Come on up.
Morning, everybody, and welcome to Pittsburgh. That's a fun thing to be able to say. There is a space conference in Pittsburgh. When we got started 16 years ago, that was just a pipe dream. And here we are today. And that is something I'm so proud of, to be able to say that we've had a hand in building right here in Pittsburgh. So I'm going to talk a little bit about Astrobotic today. You guys got a chance to, oh, that is working. Yeah, that is working. A little bit of a delay. Hopefully you had a chance to check out our reception last night at the Moonshot Museum and see our landers up close and personal. We've come a long way in 16 years as a company. So Astrobotic is all about making space accessible to the world, and we are starting with the moon. We have big visions and dreams for the moon, but the biggest thing we're known for, of course, is our lunar deliveries coming up imminently. Our first flight happens 2 months from now. We're going to be taking off from Florida and sending our lander to the surface of the moon and deploying about 16 payloads on the surface. But we think of the surface of the moon as our backyard. It's our nearest neighbor in the solar system. It's the place we need to go to learn to live off the land, to do mining and extraction and use the resources and learn to live off the land so that we can one day go even beyond the moon and further into our solar system. So just a little bit on Astrobotic and all the projects that are going on. We've got 2 lunar missions to go to the surface of the moon. Our first one flies in December of 2023. We're just waiting for the launch vehicle to let us know when to ship, which should happen any day now. And then the Griffin mission is our second mission to the surface of the moon. That's going to go in 2024 and deliver a 1,000-pound NASA rover to the pole of the moon and drill for water. We also have 2 platforms that are going to be headed to the surface of the moon in rover form. Cube rover, there's 2 different forms of that's going to be going. And then we're also thinking about the future of the surface of the moon in lunar grid and thinking about power grids and infrastructure, because you can't just get to the moon. What are you going to do when you're there? And we want to make sure that our landers and interface with all of the infrastructure on the surface. So we're imagining a lunar grid system, and we already have contracts and work underway that I'm going to show you some pictures of here. But first, So the lunar grid concept is the idea of spreading out very large solar arrays at the poles of the moon. And if you interconnect them, you can create a reliable, robust power grid that can sustain through the lunar night and provide power for charging, power for mining, power for science, power for our astronauts on the surface of the moon. We are building a full-scale version of this right now, and we're going to be sending this into thermal vacuum at the conclusion of that contract. We're talking a 60-foot tall tower, solar on top. Very large amounts of power. And again, you can interconnect these things and build up a whole grid. We imagine also being able to plug in a nuclear source to this so that you could have distributed power with cabling that can connect everything out on the surface. Just a little bit on the company. We are now, since 2007, we have grown dramatically. We are now a 240-person company, primarily based here in Pittsburgh, and we've got another 30 or so people out in the Mojave with our recent acquisition of Maston Space Systems, who's now a part of Astrobotic. So we really are excited. The company itself has yet to prove itself, and we haven't had missions to the surface of the moon just yet, but it's coming. But the people who work for us have been a part of many, many missions. We've got alumnus from almost all the big space companies as part of the company. So and we really are trying to create something special for the surface of the moon with our really unique experience at the company. So we're expanding here in Pittsburgh. We've already outgrown the facility. So as you saw last night, that is our headquarters with Moonshot Museum as the front door part of that. We're going to be expanding south into a new building just next to the stadium here. And this is going to add capacity for another 150 Astrobotic folks. And we're also going to be hosting the Keystone Space Collaborative, which is the Pittsburgh's region industry group to try to build up the space cluster here in town. And this is just what it will look like when it's completed. And that this will open the beginning of 2025. So just to get a sense of what it means for space here in Pittsburgh and Pennsylvania. Pittsburgh's not used to space. If you go out to a bar in Pittsburgh and you say, hey, I work in the space industry, you get a lot of attention. People laugh at you a little bit. They're like, what? Space what? But if you're in Florida, if you're in Houston, if you're in San Francisco, you're used to that, right? You know someone who knows someone that works in the space industry. So it's a unique opportunity for us. We kind of take that responsibility very seriously and think about us as an ambassador to the region. And certainly opening that up for the people of the region and also the lawmakers of the region. And that helps generally build up more support for the space industry in our nation. We've got 184 Pennsylvania suppliers that we've got at supplying the spacecraft. So a lot of the spacecraft you saw last night is Pennsylvania made. We're doing almost 13 million in annual contracts. These are subcontracts out to all of those suppliers to build up that industry locally. 218 employees here, and we are proud to have every employee at the company own a piece of the company. One thing that sets us apart is we don't have big, large backers. We haven't raised a lot of money. So it's really just employee owned, and we've been building it with grassroots style, which is a very Pittsburgh thing to do. We just kind of pull up our bootstraps and go to work. And we're trying to bring that blue collar space mentality to the space industry. So the Moonshot Museum, hopefully you guys got a chance to check this out last night. Our goal as a company is to make space accessible to the world. We're doing that with our landers to go to the surface of the moon. We're doing that with our infrastructure, thinking about the future of the moon and how that's going to interact with the whole world. And we're telling that story in the Moonshot Museum. We're showing the Pittsburgh region what is possible in space, that you don't have to be just an engineer to work in space. You don't have to go work for NASA. The $480 billion industry that is space has hundreds of thousands of people working for it. And you can be a space lawyer like my wife. You can be a business person. You can be in the marketing side. You can be in all sorts of the space industry. And this is what the Space Museum, the Moonshot Museum is all about, is showing that window into the space world for our next generation here in Pittsburgh. Had just opened, just actually celebrated our first anniversary of Moonshot Museum. We've had more than 10,000 visitors through already, and most Pittsburghers still don't know about us. So this is just the very beginning of the excitement of this whole region starting to come alive and starting to say, hey, let's be a part of this space industry. And we're starting to make some serious headway. So we're all getting ready for this moment that is coming very soon. We're talking 2 months. 2 months from now, we're going to be launching in Florida. And then about 30 days after that, we're going to be celebrating right here in Pittsburgh. The first landing on the surface of the moon for Astrobotic and one of the first commercial landings on the surface. So we're incredibly excited. It's been a long journey with CLIPS. And before that, with all of the things that added up and stepped into where we are with Catalyst and everything before, 16 years in the making. It's been a long journey. We're a 16-year overnight success story. But here we are, we're right on the precipice, and I'm so excited and so proud of the team at Astrobotic that has made this possible. The lander has been through every test you could imagine. We feel very confident about that. Been through the full environmental gamut. It's just sitting, waiting to go. It's itching to go. It's imminently going to be shipped to the Cape and sent up on that Vulcan launch vehicle. So incredibly exciting. And I'm so happy that all of you have come out to check out Pittsburgh and take a look at the space industry from a Pittsburgh perspective. And I hope you see that our vision of what we think we can turn this region into. We think Pittsburgh can be a real powerhouse in space. And we think that this mission is going to really kick things off and create that spark for a whole next generation. So again, thank you so much for coming and checking out Pittsburgh. I hope you go on the tour. I believe there's a tour going through Astrobotic at some point during the conference as well. But again, thank you for being a part of it, and thank you for coming to Pittsburgh. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. So our next speaker will be introduced by APL's James Mastandrea. Come on up, James.
Use this one. It's up to you. Cool. Good morning, everyone. I am very excited for this next session. My name is James Mastandrea, and I'm the lead for the LSIC Interoperability Working Group. It is my pleasure to introduce Dr. Phil Root, the Director of the Strategic Technology Office at DARPA. Dr. Root joined DARPA in May of 2017 as a program manager in the Tactical Technology Office, and his research interests include unmanned vehicles, collaborative autonomy, and machine learning algorithms. Prior to joining DARPA, Dr. Root served as the director of the Center of Innovation and Engineering at the U.S. Military Academy at West Point. In his role, he coordinated the research and outreach of a team of professors spanning the electrical engineering, chemistry, physics, mathematics, computer science, environmental engineering, and mechanical engineering departments. He also had a faculty position at the Academy's civil and mechanical engineering departments. Previously, he served in leadership roles at various U.S. Army Distributed Common Ground Stations, the NASA Astronaut Office, and headquarters company at the U.S. Army's 52nd Aviation Regiment. If you have questions for Dr. Root during this session, please post them to Slido. We may have an opportunity to answer several of them today, but for those we don't get to, we'll get to tomorrow during tomorrow's panel session. Tomorrow's panel session will not be aired live, but it will be recorded and posted to the LSIC website afterwards. And now it is my great pleasure to introduce Dr. Phil Root. Please give him a warm LSIC introduction.
Thank you, James. Much appreciated. So with every resume, all of it's true and some of it actually happened. So I appreciate the warm introduction. I've been in DARPA for a period of time, a short period of time, never long enough, and in the Army before that. And I've been part of many communities, whether I was an Army aviator or at DARPA. I've been fortunate to be part of the AI community, or the tactical robotics community. And I would submit that there is no community that has that same, drive and passion as this community here, as the lunar surface innovation community. And so my hope is to play a role, and I want to outline what I believe DARPA's role in the lunar surface innovation community might look like. If you're not familiar with DARPA, DARPA has been around since 1958, born out of the same crisis that bore NASA. So we share common DNA from the very beginning. And our role, and it's fun to look at this and say, we get to create breakthrough paradigm shifting technical solutions. We get to accept significant technical risk. We get to disrupt, accelerate technology roadmaps. And I would submit that really our role is not that we get to do those things, but we have the responsibility to do those things. And that's a difference that it took me a while to understand at DARPA, but we have the responsibility to take risk. We have the responsibility to actually take risk professionally. You're going to meet the program manager for the Luna 10 effort here in a moment. And I hope you recognize the professional risk that our program managers take. Because if we are taking significant technical risk, there's a non-zero chance that those technical investments will fail. And that is a reflection, apparent reflection on the program manager. And that is the risk that our program managers take. And so when you meet a DARPA PM, recognize that their role is to burn the boats, get out and take some significant risk. And so I want to outline some of the risks that we take, but it's our responsibility because there are very few other agencies that have the authority and ability to take those kinds of risks. But if successful, we have these kinds of results. Understand we're streaming to those that can't be here in Pittsburgh. And so the first breakthrough I'd offer is the ARPANET, or the internet that is bringing that streaming to you. The next I'd like to highlight just briefly is stealth. Stealth is a great example because stealth was born in an era where the Air Force was being very successful in creating the Century series of fighters that flew ever faster and ever higher to avoid surface air missiles from the Soviets. And DARPA had the audacity to say, well, what if we didn't fly faster and higher? What if we were just merely invisible? And that required a lot of technical investment in order to make real, but the real risk was countering the current paradigm within the Air Force and saying there is another way. Now, of course, that's water under the bridge, and stealth is a key part of the Air Force technical investments, et cetera. But that is what DARPA tries to do, is say, there might be another way. And then audaciously stand up and say, but what are the technical investments needed to bring that about? On the far right, you'll see the long-range anti-ship missile. Looks like any other missile. Is actually a significant amount of autonomy at a time when autonomous capabilities were not the norm. Next to that is an unmanned aerial system or drone. Again, a technical investment brought about by DARPA. But I want to highlight the middle two. The first on the left is the DARPA Grand Challenge, really gave birth to the self-driving car community. And if you're from Pittsburgh, you'll recognize that many of the offspring, the researchers from the DARPA Grand Challenge 1 and 2, set down roots here in Pittsburgh. And there's a thriving on-road community here that has pedigree back to those days. I wanted to highlight this because it is a classic dual use. There's a hard challenge. DARPA underwrote that risk, but it gave birth to a community, and it's absolutely of dual use because now we have autonomous capabilities within the military, sure, but the real growth in that capability is in the commercial space. And the next is the Luke arm that you see. I love the Luke arm because it's intended for veterans. Veterans are, by their nature, dual use, if you will, military and civilians in one. And so the ability to provide prosperity for our veterans is an investment thread at DARPA. So in all of these, what I want to highlight, rather than the successes, one is take some risk. Two, I claim when DARPA does its best work, we create a community. And three, we have these opportunities for dual use that bring about shared prosperity, a thread that I'll carry throughout the next couple of graphics. So within the ecosystem, we tackle challenges, of course, for national security, but we've been a partner with NASA in the past. We are no strangers. Most recently, in July, the DARPA demonstration rocket for agile cislunar operations, the Draco rocket, which is seeking to demonstrate nuclear thermal rocketry, inked a deal with NASA to collaborate in phase 2 and go to flight in 2027. Nuclear thermal rocketry 10,000 times more mass efficient than electric propulsion, 3 to 5 times higher specific impulse than chemical propulsion. And DARPA is underwriting this risk, but thrilled to be working with NASA to bring this to bear for NASA operations. In our founding days, the Saturn V and the Centaur LOX hydrogen upper stage, both developed by ARPA and then extended significantly by DARPA. And the reason I wanted to highlight these, one, is because we have this shared DNA in technical rigor. We have this shared DNA in striving for a better tomorrow. But we also have this shared trajectory where DARPA might make some investment and then we get out. I view this as technical investments, but I prefer to think of this as a catalyzation process. We play a role and then we leave, and that is key to what I'll be sharing about of relevance to this community. NASA does not. NASA endures, and so in the case of Draco, obviously in the Saturn V and the Centaur, NASA endured. I'd like to highlight one additional example, that is the one on the right. This is the transit satellite, a precursor to GPS. Quick quiz, who was the prime for the transit satellites? JHU APL. So thank you for all those involved. Quick shout out to no one in the room was present at the time. So JHU did great work. I wanted to highlight on this story. So yes, it was a precursor to GPS, changed the way we think about navigation. Fantastic story. The idea was conceived in 1958. The research was started on the Doppler shift frequency algorithms necessary to establish geolocation in 1960. First flown in 1963, operational 36 satellites with the Navy in 1968, and then operational in 1996. What does that mean as a historical metaphor for what we're interested here? What can DARPA do to take significant risk, demonstrate something is possible, and then get out of the way for an enduring partner that makes the remainder of the investments at speed and scale for the nation and national security, but also for our prosperity? I mean, can you imagine a day without GPS? I doubt. So if today was a day without GPS, there'd be nobody here, right? No Ubers, no Google Maps. We'd all be wandering around Pittsburgh trying to find this place. And so thrilled that DARPA made an investment early days that changed this paradigm, but then we get out. And so that's, again, another thread for us to consider. So as we look at opportunities for DARPA to invest in the lunar surface community, it's not something to be taken lightly. And so we thought about in what ways could we contribute? Should we contribute? It's not a foregone conclusion. DARPA has a lot of money. We don't have any extra money, right? So we have to invest wisely for the greatest return on investment. So could we convince ourselves that the lunar surface and the cislunar space created an opportunity for us that we couldn't ignore? And so we met many of you. In fact, it's great to see so many of you here. And when we met, we said, what could we do to help? What are the kinds of problems we could address? And what we walked away with is a deep desire for us to be a catalyst for the commercial ecosystem and shared prosperity at speed and scale. So what would we need to do to catalyze the commercial ecosystem to bring about shared prosperity at speed and scale? What we realized is we think there's an opportunity for us to invest in lunar infrastructure. Why lunar infrastructure? When we met with many of you, you shared your intellectual property, your unique insight, your business case. And that was then you had to wrap it around a rover or a lander with a solar panel farms or VSATs. And perhaps you had to bring about your own PNT, your own communications. And what we know, and here we are in the city of Pittsburgh, is that the reason that cities are so thriving is that you share resources. You don't see pockets of innovation and industry in isolation. You see an ecosystem. So if we were to catalyze the lunar commercial economy, we thought bringing about key investments in infrastructure might be a significant return on investment. But then the question is what? What should we do? There's so many things we could do. And how would we know when we're successful? meaning we want to choose those investments that could make the biggest difference, particularly in speed and scale. Hence the reason that we're interested in that we launched the Luna 10 study. So Luna 10, for those of you who are tracking the 10-year lunar architecture, asks the question, what are those commercial investments to catalyze the commercial ecosystem? What are the foundational nodes that could demonstrate the existence of a thriving lunar economy? And how would we do it quickly? The interest was to bring about a portfolio of performers that could communicate and not share intellectual property, but share technology roadmaps as exemplars, as members of this community, as representatives of this community, and say, what could we do together? What are some sketches of a future lunar economy? And the benefit to DARPA was it would highlight foundational nodes, technology challenges that DARPA could consider then investing in subsequently. But importantly, I speak to a room full of engineers, it's the metrics. What would actually make a difference? Because we could, for example, invest in power distribution. What we want to know is what level of power distribution, what range, what duty cycle would make a difference. And we could do that in isolation, but we really wanted to hear from the community to validate the direction of technical investments. And so Luna 10 was an approach to very quickly sketch what a variety of thriving lunar ecosystems, commercial ecosystems might look like, and hopefully back out technical investments thereafter. In the process, we are clearly building bridges across the interagency as well, and so thrilled to be able to work with the NASA team here in the front rows and beyond in order to share this common vision. So without further ado, I'll share those representatives of the lunar surface innovation community that we've asked to be as representatives for this study, the Luna 10 study, and help us sketch out a variety of commercial ecosystem futures. What you see here, and these are selected for negotiation, and credit to all involved to very quickly get to this point. Subsequent or subject to successful contract negotiation, these are the teams we've asked again to represent and have the pieces come together and say, what could a commercial ecosystem look like? Well, if you've read the solicitation, we were interested in a variety of different application spaces, but none of these applicants and proposers were one-dimensional, and they really offered an ability to communicate broadly with the other team members. They brought many facets to the problem, and again, the intent is not that they would be exclusive, but they would be representatives of this community. So whether it's a market analysis to include the economics as well as the logistics of a commercial ecosystem, or power, as you see, mining and ISRU, we're interested also in sustainable approaches to commercial ecosystem and ventures on the lunar surface. There are clear technical reasons to consider communications, position, navigation, and timing together in one technical bin. But really, you see the companies there are really broad in the kinds of capabilities they would bring to bear and brought to this ecosystem. In transit mobility, again, logistics is important. In fact, logistics being a lifeblood of the economy. I'm interested in such things as both as up mass, down mass, as well as cross mass. And then construction and robotics, which should be great fun to see, but would, we believe, catalyze, again, the lunar economy. So again, subject to successful contract negotiation, these would be some representatives. And a reminder, again, if you read the proposal or the solicitation, the intent is to be inclusive, to take homework assignments. These groups would come out and then report out to you and say, here's what we are seeing, and get feedback, and then go back down, work with engineers, and have engineers communicate with engineers and say, what could the future look like? But already you're skeptical. You're skeptical because you're an engineer, and this concept deserves your skepticism. Why? Because, okay, we can share a roadmap. We can come together and share a technology roadmap. Who cares? I think the difference is, as we look at viable business development, it's international standards that actually drive a significant part of business development and of commercial development. Shared standards like IEEE standards, like 3GPP and telecom, allow a multitude of players and allow us to be very, very inclusive. And so this Luna 10 solicitation does not consider drafting those standards, but we realize that's a piece that's missing. We draw motivation from the DARPA RSGS program, the Robotic Servicing of Geosynchronous Satellites, bit of a mouthful. Program started a while ago, and significant technical challenges associated with robotic manipulators, rendezvous proximity operations. And the intent was to, and still is the intent, to create a commercial marketplace that's commercially viable, but available for national security, to service our geosynchronous satellites. But a key part that was missing, if you just focus on the technical, you miss the creation of technical and safety standards that would allow such a marketplace to be actually viable. Meaning, how does a customer and a RSGS provider conduct rendezvous proximity operations? How do they interface? And what are the safety protocols? And so the RSGS program in parallel gave birth to the Consortium for Execution of Rendezvous and Service Operations. I think the O is silent there at the end. Confers was this DARPA-led effort for 5 years that eventually transitioned to full sustainment by the commercial marketplace. So DARPA is now out. We were a catalyst. We started the creation of these technical and safety standards. DARPA has now stepped back, and industry has stepped forward and said, we will continue to propagate the creation of these technical and safety standards. So in that way, thrilled to also announce the LOGIC Consortium, the Lunar Operating Guidelines for Infrastructure Consortium. It is now live. It will be administered by JHU APL. Why JHU APL? Because we think that LOGIC is absolutely essential in order to catalyze the commercial economy, but it's also viable as a set of technical standards that will allow the commercial space to interface with the government space. And so it made a lot of sense to work with APL in their role as the LSIC coordinator and prime for us to be able to then have something very specific to what we, DARPA, were aiming for, but absolutely had cross DNA with NASA and the broader LSIC community. And so the APL has gone live as of this morning. Logic.jhuapl.edu is where you can sign up and ensure that we hear your voice as we start drafting. Now, the real intent is, as Luna 10 is unfolding and we conduct these studies and understand what technical hurdles would prevent, or if tackled, would catalyze greater investment and a launch pace, we will then have specific elements of logic to address those technical standards. So if we think that the first piece that's missing from the commercial ecosystem is communications, position, navigation, and timing, we will have a specific focus within logic to address and create those technical standards. So thrilled that I get to stand in front of you and say, we have a hypothesis. We have a hypothesis, but we're DARPA. It's not clear that this hypothesis is true. I mean, it's great to be able to contribute, but our role is to take risk. And so the hope is that we take risk in terms of speed. When you see Luna 10 is 7 months. That's awfully fast. Why 7 months? Because I don't think you would permit us to take any longer. You want us to move really quickly and see if there's a game to be played, an investment to be had. And if so, let's go. And then we will get out of the way. That's an unproven hypothesis, and we'll get started immediately. And another hypothesis is that the creation of technical standards and safety standards will assist in that we could play a role. Again, that's unproven. And our program managers are those that form these hypotheses and then go work tirelessly in order to try to demonstrate that today is the day. We couldn't do it yesterday, but we can do it today. So I'll end with a recruiting plea. If you are willing to take that professional risk and be part of the DARPA team as a program manager, burn the boats, come to DARPA for 2 to 4 years, be part of a team trying to bring this to bear, and then be a catalyst and go and step aside, I'd love to talk to you. But for all others, thank you for this opportunity for DARPA to work with you. Again, it's thrilling to stand in front of you as a community that is absolutely driven, is passionate, and is hopeful for shared prosperity on the lunar surface and in the commercial ecosystem. I have time for a couple questions, or at least the opportunity to address some, but thank you again.
Thank you very much, Dr. Root. Yes, so we have time for a couple of questions. Thanks for those who have been posting those online. The first question is, what was the response like for the Luna 10 call, and any recommendations for those who were not selected?
Yeah, great question. So when I said that DARPA program managers take a lot of risk, the biggest risk is at when you release a solicitation. Why? You convince the DARPA director that you have an idea. She gives you the funding. You draft this solicitation, you launch it, you wait 30 days, 45 days. If there are no responses, you are shown to be hollow. You are shown that you actually don't know what you're talking about. That was not the case this time. There were several hundred responses, and it was incredibly hard, one, to address them all at scale, and two, to do it very quickly. Government source selection is the most sacred thing we do as government, most sacred thing we do. It prevents, we have so many safeguards to ensure that we have no conflicts of interest, demonstrate no nepotism, and look at real technical rigor. What you saw in that portfolio was an approach to look at companies that were had expertise. But again, we're not saying that these are the exemplars within their domain, but rather their proposals were those that looked like they would work best across this network. And so it's really a portfolio question of which companies should come together with the expertise necessary to have this conversation. You can tell it was focused on technical. We benefited from the fact that many of those that were that fit within this portfolio, we have representation from small, from big, and even some international participants, which I think is absolutely essential. So if you were not successful, if your logo was not up there, the challenge to all those that are is to ensure that your voice is heard and that your input is considered, because really this is a role to make sure that the future ecosystem is vibrant for all, not just by any means for those that are listed.
Thank you. Maybe one more.
Right.
Our DARPA's, sorry.
Either way.
Oh, sorry, yes. Actually, we're gonna.
Excuse me, Marshall Eubanks here. So going on the Logic website, there's a site ability to like register interest, basically. There's nothing about how this might be a membership organization. Is this a membership organization? Is this something like the IETF, or is it going to be like, IEEE, or how do you see that going forward?
Yeah, we absolutely see this as a consortium to bring input in. I'll defer to the APL team that's implementing this for them to outline the mechanisms that they are going to seek your input, ensure that I faithfully represent the consortium that they're implementing for DARPA. It's also going to be a topic on the panel for tomorrow to outline the overlaps and the complementarity between Logic and LSIC.
Thank you.
And we'll do one more from
Great.
online. Are DARPA's contributions in Lunar a part of a longer effort? How do you see these activities continuing to evolve?
Yeah. Personally, as a citizen, as a father of science-minded kids, I would love to see DARPA's investments continue. But as a DARPA investor, we don't know. And so Luna 10 is absolutely critical for us to validate that we should do something more. Really, the challenge is to those that are selected to prove this hypothesis, prove that some technical investments to reduce the technical risk and demonstrate that we can move at speed and scale. Again, unproven. DARPA is prepared to do more, but if the hypothesis is unproven, then we'll step aside and allow you to, if there's nothing we can do to contribute, we're not going to force our way in.
Thank you very much. And let's please thank Dr. Root one more time. Now I'm going to pass it back over to Josh Cahill for the next keynote.
Is this live? Yeah, great. Okay, so we have a moment. We've been getting questions what the Slido, what the Logic website is. It's https://logic.jhuapl.edu. We'll try to get that up on a slide shortly. Okay, so remember, if you aren't using Slido, we're gathering questions that way. So the QR code for that will occasionally be up on the screen, but it's also in the agenda. And now we'll go ahead and get ready for our next speaker. He has private sector experience with work which includes work under NASA, DARPA, and Air Force. And he has previous experience in the private sector with Reliable Robotics, Blue Origin, and Virgin Galactic, to name a few. And he is NASA's chief technologist, AC Sharani.
All right, good morning, everyone. It was a cold day in February 2020 when I went to the kickoff meeting for the first LSIC. So I was there with all of you at the beginning, and it's my pleasure to also be here when Phil announces the first cohort of Luna 10 folks and the consortium. So I've been lucky twice, I guess, in this LSIC journey that I've been on. So I'm AC Sharani, NASA's chief technologist based at NASA headquarters. As I like to say, I'm the 5th permanent chief technologist at NASA since Bobby Braun was the first one. And it's kind of like Doctor Who. Every few years, the agency chief technologist regenerates into a new form. So I am the new agency chief technologist. So today I'll talk a little bit about where I am in terms of NASA headquarters, so as you can engage with myself in our office, a little bit of observations on Artemis, and some ideas on technology infusion, the intellectual challenges that I'm kind of thinking about relative to my position at the agency. So let's see if this works. So I am located in the Office of Technology Policy and Strategy, which is coupled with our NASA A suite or administrator suite. So as we say, in a corporate strategy context, there's a or commercial context, there's a corporate strategy team associated with the CEO, COO of an organization. In the NASA context, we have our NASA administrator, Bill Nelson, deputy administrator, Pam Melroy, and associate administrator, Bob Cabana, the A suite. So we are the strategy, policy, and technology shop for that team that looks at cross-directorate problems, interagency NASA issues, and thinks about things in innovative ways or challenging intellectual and policy issues. We're helping our A-suite leadership and the directorate shape policy. We're providing data analysis and advice, and some promoting our administration's strategies internally and externally, and also maintaining awareness of what's happening. Let's see, next slide, if it comes up. All right. Yeah, I don't know if you can go to the next slide. And so in terms of my own position, I did ask ChatGPT a few months ago, what is my job? And I think it came out with a relatively good answer. I was not using any NASA sensitive technology to ask this question or sensitive information to ask this question. But in terms of looking and helping the agency develop new technologies, partnering, working with commercial industry and ensuring we do that safely, but also generally looking at innovation across the agency and how we can help. So not a bad answer, but I had to make my own answer. So next slide, if you want to. So this is now kind of my vision in terms of kind of the one sentence observation of what I'm trying to do, which is looking at how to, looking at the technology investments we have today. I'll get into that a little bit here shortly. Jumpstarting new kind of innovative ideas, red teaming those ideas with our directorates, and then spinning them off to them to move out upon, and then looking at the infusion problem. As I'll get to later, there is the problem, intellectual problem of parts of the agency are maturing technologies, yet are the program offices using those technologies. So it's very similar to the DARPA problem in terms of a transition customer. Having dealt with DARPA from the outside in my previous lives, DARPA program managers are trying to demo something in a few years, but then also are looking for infusion into a program of record. Is there a service that will take that technology? And so there's a similar analogy to the NASA problem that we have of, to be perfectly blunt, the STMD, incredible work they're doing in maturing technologies. And then we have a directorate like ESDMD that's in charge of the Moon and Mars Program Office. And are they using those technologies? And there's good stories there. But I also think there's more in terms of the valley of death, not of technology maturation, but of technology infusion that I'm kind of thinking about. And the power I have is to do some of that with studies, analyses, and that's that idea of light and leverage. Now, in terms of what I'm trying to do, it's kind of a Venn diagram overlap of North Stars, leveraging kind of partnerships, and then doing that with in a very fast process. So the North Stars include looking at our overall technology portfolio, looking at things like our lunar exploration plans, and things that refer to protecting and enhancing the planet. So that includes things like wildfire technologies, planetary defense, those kinds of issues. How can we affect that change? Our position in NASA headquarters can affect that change through studies, analyses that we do, but also activities we do with our directorates. But in addition to that, also leverage our commercial industry, leverage our other government agency partnerships. I'm part of a group called the Science and Technology Partnerships Forum with Space Force and NRO, where I converse with those representatives of how we could leverage kind of joint roadmaps. For instance, we have an interagency quantum sensing study that we're engaged with Space Force and NRO in our office. And then also look at process-wise, how we can do those things in more innovative ways, more innovative tools that could be available to the agency that legally could be available to us, but maybe we need to dust those off, or other government agencies have some tools. Can we also leverage those similar tools? Next slide. Now, I'm not doing this alone. There are people supporting me. So when I joined the agency, they're like, well, you're at NASA headquarters and you've got folks at headquarters supporting you, but at each NASA center is also a chief technologist. So at each NASA center, there is a chief technologist. Some also have a deputy. And this is the team that's supporting me in terms of being my eyes and ears at this field centers in terms of kind of what technical work is happening. So as organizations approach me at headquarters, I can work with these chief technologists at each NASA center to connect them with the awesome work in materials technology at NASA Glenn or autonomy technology at NASA Goddard, et cetera. Next slide. All right, so one of the things in terms of looking at problems is diagnosing the problem. So when I came into the agency, one of the things I was very curious about is getting an accurate quantitative assessment of our technology inventory. How much are we spending across the directorates at the agency? And each directorate has different information silos, and kind of coordinating all of that for our senior leaderships. The first step of that is what I call a technology inventory. So this is the first cut of a technology inventory, looking at across the mission directorates, which are kind of the tip of the spears of implementing our NASA strategic plan. How much from each of these directorates are we investing in quote unquote technology? Now, this is the first cut. And I think this is an annual process that I'll be doing in terms of looking at a cross-directorate portfolio of technology investments. And there's much more detail behind that, but roughly about 10% of our annual budget is quote unquote technology. Now, this is not complete, because there are technology buckets and investments in different programs that are not reflected here. But as every year in terms of an annual process within our office at OTPS, refining this analysis and then doing some analytics on the technology inventory data that we gather. So next slide. And this data that you just saw consists of various breakouts within STMD, our Space Technology Directorate, ESDMD, has the Moon to Mars Program Office, as well as our Science Mission Directorate. So there's more to come here, but I think this gives you a flavor of the inventory analytical work we're doing at NASA headquarters across our directorates to help us get a little bit smarter and to ask some interesting questions. Like, for instance, not only within STMD, but across all the directorates, how much are diversity, equity, inclusion kind of funding happening? How about really early stage work across the directorates and kind of getting a macro assessment of what's happening? Slide. There's a lot of stuff happening in Lunar. Don't need to tell you, but this is a visual snapshot of some of the work, and there's even more activities going on that some of you are involved with. Slide. And I'll get to this now, but also at the end. As was mentioned yesterday, we developed, and Spuds Vogel is right here, I point to him as the mastermind behind some of this at NASA headquarters of our Moon to Mars objectives process. And the three pillars that I look to in terms of not only exploration, but technology maturation, which are science, inspiration, and national posture. And I think this is a great framework of these three pillars that then move onwards in more detailed decomposition to objectives and then use cases and functions and sub-architectures and architectures and elements. But as I look at technology investments, these are relative to Artemis technologies and lunar technologies, what I look to in terms of the three pillars. And we'll get back a little bit into this later as well. Next slide. And so QR code, a lot of QR codes here at this conference. Once again, this is NASA.gov/Moon to Mars architecture, where you will get the architecture definition document, as we call it, which is a great public document for you to contribute comments on as we roll out and discuss our planning for human lunar return and subsequent segments of Artemis. And so I'm very encouraged by the process that Pam Melroy, Spuds, and everyone else have put together coming into the agency to allow feedback from commercial industry, other government agencies, international partnerships. And I think the way we're going about going back to the moon is technically different, but also in this process, also different than maybe 20 years ago, how NASA was imagining it. So it's really cool to be part of the agency when we have this kind of process. And specifically on this process, something I would kind of challenge you all to look at is not just human lunar return and the first few Artemis missions, which we're investing a lot of funding there, but really for this community to look at the segment, as we call it, of the ACR process of sustained lunar evolution. And Walt had mentioned that yesterday and used a version of this slide, but really this is what I'm also looking to and what this community should also look to in terms of SLE, the sustained lunar evolution segment of this Artemis plan that includes all of you, includes your ideas, includes, I think, what Luna 10 is headed to. And in the ACR process, I would encourage you to provide comments, not only on the entire document and white papers that NASA is releasing, but also on this segment, which I think we would appreciate comments upon. So kind of a challenge to all of you as we do the yearly process of engagement, getting feedback. And I look forward to we look forward to, and our ESDMD colleagues, releasing the next version of this architecture definition document over the next few months. All right, so I'm very excited by the tremendous investment NASA is making in many of these lander technologies and the companies behind those technologies. I think, as I personally calculated, we're probably spending $7 to $8 billion on what you see here, which are CLPS landers, human landing system landers, crewed lander demos, uncrewed lander demos, and all these kinds of lander investments and company investments. Some public-private partnerships have a tremendous amount of technologies, not only with the CLPS landers that we see today, but the human landing system investments we're making. And the thing I like to say is, specifically, let's say on the human landing system, with both SpaceX and Blue Origin, we are investing in public-private partnerships where these companies are investing almost an equal amount of what we're investing at NASA. Not only that, the way they're going about it is much more innovatively than maybe our reference architecture started out with. If you look back upon the history of the Human Landing System program, the initial government reference architecture was an expendable architecture, a multi-stage architecture. That's something that the government had put out there for industry to look at. What did industry finally respond with? These are single-stage landers that are both leveraging propellant depot-based architectures. I think that's an incredible comment to make, that is the Human Landing System program. And our commercial vendors have come out with these unique solutions that are a little bit further away from even the government reference architecture from a few years ago. So, and leveraging advanced cryogenic fluid management technologies and other technologies, including the capability to land tens of metric tons on the lunar surface in a cargo version. So very, very excited in how we can leverage these technologies going forward and then add on to these capabilities with other payloads. Let's see. And I'll take kind of last two slides here on this idea of technology infusion that I've been thinking about within one part of NASA to another part of NASA into the missions. And these are some examples I look to in terms of awesome examples of this successful infusion history, starting from very low early seed investments, many from STMD that have now been incorporated into actual missions. So the rollout solar array started many years ago by a company called Deployable Space Systems from an Air Force SBIR contract that after almost 24 additional SBIR contracts and additional investments by STMD has now been used over the last few years on the International Space Station, on our DART mission, on the PPE that's going to the Gateway, and also being looked at for lunar surface power. So once again, this thing that started off with an SBIR is now all across the agency in terms of our missions, which is an awesome success story. Another one is terrain relative navigation, TRN, used in the Mars 2020 program that uses maps, existing maps with visual information to get a better landing accuracy. So from going from 2 kilometers in terms of a landing ellipse error to now 50 meters. Some of this technology was matured over the last decade with companies like Mass and Space Systems and others, and leveraged by JPL. The Mars helicopter, another example of an STMD funded early stage idea that was picked up by NASA JPL leadership and pushed forward as a tech demo. That tech demo has a very interesting history relative to the organization accepting or not accepting that tech demo. But separate from that, at the end of the day, that tech demo that was tens of millions of dollars for a 2-kilogram helicopter that's now done more than 60 flights for more than 100 minutes and gone for almost 9 miles on the Martian surface is now a version of it is now baseline for our Mars sample return program. It's baselined on the Mars sample return program to, in the event the mainline system can't, to return 10 of these, which are right now on the Martian surface. So this helicopter, at a version of it, the Mars sample retrieval helicopters will pick these up in case the primary rover cannot. Once again, an awesome infusion story started from a NIAC idea funded by STMD. Optical comm. For the last decade, we've been investing in optical comm around the moon, at ISS, coming up, as well as low Earth orbit. So that includes the T-Bird program, looking at several gigabits per second in terms of data rates from low Earth orbit, the Psyche mission, which is demonstrating a deep space optical comm terminal, as well as the Artemis 2 mission, which is using another optical comm system to relay this data back. And once again, looking for how we can infuse this technology. And then finally, another example is the Nokia Bell Labs tipping point for 3G PPP. That was mentioned in the last talk from Phil. So once again, that tipping point investment that's going to demonstrate that on Eclipse lander, how can we leverage that in the future and maybe in combination with other technologies at the end of the day to achieve our objectives. And then final slide, I'll leave with this. So I think as you think about the technologies and the missions that you infuse, one thing I would challenge us is the 3 whys and the 3 pillars of science, national posture, and inspiration. I'm also focusing on the 2 pillars of national posture and inspiration. Are we investing in things that are mapping to those 2 pillars? There's a lot of investment we're making for science in terms of the Moon to Mars objectives, but also I think about those 2 objectives as well. And can we achieve capabilities with elements to hit those objectives, to become, to have the capability to go to other places in the solar system. And so the final thought I will leave you with is something I've been thinking about the last few months on this idea of national posture and inspiration. and the Artemis moment. So we talk about the Artemis moment, which is when the first woman and person of color will land on the lunar surface in the Artemis missions. I think for this community and for me, we should, there's a lot of investment at NASA to get that mission done safely. But for this community, we should think about later missions and how we can extend that. And specifically, I look at the Artemis moment for me to a lunar moment in the 21st century. And what I mean by that is the lunar moment for me that we should all be working to is the moment when a human steps on the lunar surface. And from that moment on, there will always be a human on the lunar surface. And what that means is that there will be a child born on the earth that will always know that there was a human on the moon. So the first time you look up at the moon, their parent will tell them, well, there's a person up there and there will always be a person up there. And the technologies you're investing in, the capabilities you're investing in will help us get to that future, that lunar moment that I think we're all aspiring to. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Some of the questions coming in on Slido. Regarding the international partnerships, as was discussed at NASA Symposium recently, foreign companies cannot get funding. How do those partnerships work then?
So I think there are collaborations we have. So our Science Mission Directorate has done no exchange of funds collaborations for many science missions. So there are those engagements in terms of leveraging principal investigators across science missions. There are ways where we are working with others in terms of tech maturation. There are other ways in terms of the Artemis Accord signatories that we're working with what elements might international contributors provide to the Artemis architecture. So I think there are various engagement paths separate from funding that could help energize these collaborations that are principal investigator based, kind of element integration into architecture based. That could be ways for people to collaborate, for those entities to collaborate. And there's obviously government space agency collaborations. I would also say the other places people may want to think about are commercial collaborations. And what I mean by that is when I was in commercial industry, we actually did commercial to commercials international space collaborations, managing the ITAR process, managing technical assistance agreement process, but those things can't be managed because I was successful in my previous career in doing that. And so I'd also encourage that in some sense, don't wait for the government to engage in those collaborations, reach out to international partners. What technologies can you leverage or license? There are many companies that have US offices and presences in domestically. So there are a lot of ways, even without funding, that collaboration can happen.
Great, thanks. So we actually have some questions in the room, so please state your name and your institution and go ahead.
Okay, Clive Neal, University of Notre Dame. AC, I'd vote for you. Your question, great presentation, a lot of technology going on at NASA. What is the spin back potential of these technologies to planet Earth to make society better down here? There's a lot of investment going in, and if I was a cynic, I'd say, why are we spending all that money? I get it, but there are others that would say, well, it's a taxpayer funded budget. So what's the return on investment to the taxpayer down here on the basis of these technologies?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. I think there's a document spinoffs that NASA does every year that has some data in terms of what people want in terms of some of that. There's also reports we publish on research on the International Space Station that comes back in terms of drugs and other information, medical information. So there's like different sources we put out that NASA puts out on that. I think my answer to that is the return to humans, the return to this nation is based upon science, national posture, and inspiration, a weighting of those three. There are scientific discoveries we're making about the knowledge of the universe, how the solar system was formed. Going to the moon will help us understand better how this solar system was formed, so then maybe how other solar systems form. And on the way to the search for life, fundamentally exploring difficult questions like dark matter, dark energy, the beginning of the universe. I think our nation is interested in that. We spend a lot of money with National Science Foundation and others and NASA to understand these fundamental science questions that we as humans have and this nation has. And then also there is the national posture aspect and the inspiration aspect. There's a thing called moonshot, the term moonshot. Well, that came from Apollo. People we have a cancer moonshot, we have other kinds of moonshots, and we've inspired this kind of model. And I think that's something else the space and community has given back to the nation and to the world, is those kinds of inspirational kinds of ideas that we can go beyond, similar to how DARPA, helped create what we see now today in terms of the internet, So I think we have a role in terms of inspiring the next generation of scientists, engineers, to enable these future moonshots in many other ways. The other thing I think about is the technical talent that our programs are developing are creating technical talent that can be applied to other domestic industries. So we are a proving ground or of talent. For instance, in the aerospace industry, in commercial industry, many of the people I've worked with, or some of the people I've worked with, have gone to autonomous car companies, autonomous aviation companies. And so we are also seeding the next generation of technical talent for the nation.
Thank you.
So we have another question online through Slido. You have some personal experience with DARPA. What are your thoughts on Luna 10?
Yeah. So my experience with DARPA has been various, from as a provider or vendor to DARPA, and actually is kind of an interesting experience. I was at Virgin Galactic and was actually going to DARPA and pitching various air launch concepts. And Pam Melroy was the deputy DARPA director. Little did I know, many years later, I'd be working for Pam at NASA. So it's very circular kind of professional journey. Very excited by Luna 10. Very excited by the vision Phil laid out. Very excited by the companies that have been selected and the consortium. I think the consortium model, as Confers and Cosmic and now Logic showcase, we can bring these communities together like LSIC also does. So very excited about how and also the other thing is the providers that were shown, many of them were funding, NASA's funding through tipping point proposals like Nokia Bell Labs or Redwire. And so it's great to see the community that we've been supporting at NASA also DARPA recognizes as well. So I think a great future. I would encourage all of you to support Phil and DARPA in this incredible initiative. And obviously our STMD leadership is supporting Phil. I see everyone together right there. You should all hold hands, I think, but yeah, so I think it's a great program, and you all should support Phil and DARPA.
Okay. Thank you. So we're running really short on time, so I encourage you to catch AC in the outside. We're going to go ahead and move on. Thank you so much. So our next speaker is Zachary Pirtle. He's NASA's Senior Policy Advisor. There he is. Okay. Take this, or there's the. I'll look for the standby.
All right. Hello, everyone. Oh, perfect. Okay. So I know many of you from my work in the Science Mission Director, which is my primary role at NASA. So I'm here on behalf of a part-time assignment, and I feel like I'm hearing a little bit of echo or something. Is there something funky with the sound? Okay, move back. Okay. So yeah, so I've been on a part-time assignment to the policy team in the Office of Technology Policy and Strategy that AC just talked about. And so I'm going to be talking about the effort there. Okay. Great, thank you very much. So I'm excited to talk to you about this particular study that we performed in a workshop on Artemis and ethics that we just released a report a few weeks ago at League. And I'm excited to give you a teaser about it today. So I'm not going to go through slides. I'm only going to, there will be one other slide. It's a fun little surprise, but I'm mainly going to sort of give an overview of this. So first of all, when we've been out briefing and we organized this workshop on Artemis and ethics, and how do we think through the long-term ethical and societal implications of what we're doing and Moon to Mars and the Artemis mission. So as we've been talking about, we've got clear reasons for why we're going. We've got the 3 pillars that have been talked about before, but a lot of things that we're doing in NASA and with the broader international community and the commercial partners, will set precedents and have implications for the future of space for decades to come. And just as one of the last questions came up, how do you understand that impact on Earth? It's a complex problem. And so trying to think more deeply about those issues was sort of the motivating question and rationale behind this workshop that I'm going to talk about. So critically, I think it's important to realize that OTPS was trying to think more a little bit towards the future, towards thinking through what are different perspectives that can be brought to bear on these complex socio-technical issues. So this workshop that was held in April of this year was with 55 attendees, the majority of whom are actually social scientists and humanities scholars who are attending basically to provide different perspectives than what NASA normally receives. So we've got lots of amazing engineers, lots of amazing scientists, lots of amazing policy scholars, but there are a few sort of trained sociologists, ethicists, or philosophers at NASA. So we brought these people in to think about these questions. We had an interesting and engaging agenda talking about different topics in the overall context of human spaceflight. So I'll give a little bit of a teaser. So I also want to make clear up front. So the goal of this, I'm just giving a very brief teaser. I'm very thankful to Nikki and the STMD team to think about, are there ways in which LSIC could be a venue for thinking about these issues in the future? So, and I would love to talk to people afterwards in conversation about it. So what we report on the report is what happened at this workshop in April. We talk about the views that participants expressed, many of which reflect their own views. They may not reflect the views of NASA, which we make very clear in the report. The effort that we focused on in trying to highlight observations in the report from things that people will discuss at the workshop, some of the key observations that we had were it's really complicated to understand the long-term implications of what we do in space and how it affects back on Earth. So there's different research trajectories that we highlight and indicate in the report. The question of how do you share those benefits in an equitable manner is a key ethical challenge that merits more consideration. There's also questions of how do you take concepts about sustainability that exist on Earth and apply them towards concepts and apply those concepts towards the lunar surface and towards Mars. So there's lots of conceptual work that's needed to think those things through. Now, it was very fun and engaging. So we had a lot of our scientists and engineers engaging with these outside social scientists and humanities scholars. It's also a very big cultural divide. The language that the two sides speak and use and think about can be very different. And so I think we have some good highlights in the report about some of the practical as well as cultural challenges need to overcome those things. And I think there was a lot of energy from these outside social scientists who I think would love to be involved more in conversations like this. I think a lot of them would love to attend a future LSIC and to be part of a conversation like that. And I think that's worth thinking about more later. We do discuss, and again, these are just options that were suggested by participants so that NASA does not endorse or embrace. We do discuss options for how could you actually try to think more long-term and more holistically about the future ethical and societal implications of space. And so some of these range from policy considerations and trying to make sure that you're raising these issues early in the life cycle of a new technology or a new project. It also includes just different conversations, different groups that are not traditional stakeholders, that are not involved in normal NASA conversations, that are worth reaching out to and being more inclusive and talking with them more. So I will go to the next slide briefly. So I'm very excited that we released this report a few weeks ago. So this is a screenshot from the IAC meeting last week, the International Astronautical Congress. And just to kick off and to have more of this conversation, Deputy Administrator Pam Melroy actually spoke at length about this report and about the need for different countries around the world to think more deeply about these issues. So she's actually got some really nice pictures from the event, the workshop that we hosted. And I think Pam, I feel she just did a great job of approaching this with a humble spirit and an open question about how can we do more to think about these issues. So, so you can find through the QR code there, you can find a link to Pam's talk, which is far more eloquent than what I'm able to provide you here in this little teaser. And then you can find at the QR code on the previous slide, a link towards the report. So I do think that like LSIC and trying to have this holistic vision towards understanding the future of activities on the moon does make it so that if engineers that are in your shoes and positions aren't able to think more proactively about this issue, it's really hard to imagine who can. So I do hope that there could be some more collaboration on this in the future. So hopefully this is a fun little teaser about this idea. I do think just a lot of us as engineers, we really want to do more good for society. So, but it's hard to understand exactly what to do. And so this is a humble first effort towards thinking about the topic. And I will leave it at that in case there's a time for a question.
One or two questions here. So from Anonymous, what is the best way for LSIC to engage in the future in this context? Perhaps a workshop is, I guess, what they've.
Yeah, I would love to hear ideas and suggestions. I know there's a lot of these different focus groups. I do think that there's probably areas in which within any given focus group, there's probably second order consequences of things that people are considering that could have long-term societal effects that are worth considering more. I do think I'm here to listen. This is my first LSIC. I'm very happy to be here. And I'd love to hear the ideas of others.
Next question. How can those interested get involved with Artemis ethics activities? Very interested in this workshop, but it was invite only. I don't know about that.
Yeah. So my email is zpirtle@nasa.gov. So I'd love to hear from people who are curious about this topic. I also do have my colleague Amy Kaminsky here, who is one of the STMD reps and attended the Artemis and Ethics workshop. So I know she's very passionate about these issues and is a world expert on science and society issues. So I think we'd be happy to chat during lunch or to connect in the future. So
I think we have time for one more question. Do you feel this report will be approached like the Moon to Mars architecture and need routine refinements and updates? If so, at what cadence?
That's a great question. There is some language in the architecture definition document that talks about responsible use and trying to think through cultural and ethical implications. Something like that could be updated in future versions of that architecture definition document. We do say in the web release, when we release the report, that NASA will think about future forward work activities in this area. And I'm not able to speak about that publicly, but I think we're trying to figure out, are there things that make sense that to start with that are relatively easy to do, but they could have a really positive impact. So, and I do hope that there will be even more forward work than just that.
Great. I think that is all the time we have for it. Let's thank our speaker one last time.
Thank you.
Okay, so we have a 10-minute break now. I want to remind people, if you have not gotten your lunch tickets, this might be a great time to do it. You get that as registration. Also, we've moved where lunch will be picked up today. It'll be picked over by the ping pong tables. But please report back at 5 after, and we'll get started with a pretty exciting next session. Thank you. I'm sorry, one last thing. The speakers in the next session, if you can come up early so you can get fitted for your lavalier. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, please start making your way back into the auditorium. We're going to get started here in a few minutes. Please start heading back to the auditorium.
Okay, we're just getting started. All right, we're gonna start the next session, guys. If y'all want to start getting your seat, gonna get it going. Got a lot of good content. Oh, there's the mic. Okay. Yeah, a lot of good content. And one of our speakers is in Australia. So I think I get a little sleepy. So welcome, everyone. My name is Justin Starr. I'm the moderator of this panel. I'm a robotics instructor at CCAC, so I hope y'all are enjoying our campus. It's my home, so welcome. We're thrilled to see how workforce development and community colleges can play a role in exciting activities like what y'all are working on for lunar surface exploration. So before I joined the college, I was a roboticist in Pittsburgh. My company worked on sewer inspection robots. So I was just joking with the guys up here. Every time I hear someone complain about regolith, I think you have not spent time in the sewers, but I understand. So we've got a really exciting panel today of robotics experts. And I think what I'm most interested to hear them speak to is we heard a lot about the infrastructure that we're going to need to create on the lunar surface. How can these robots contribute to that? When things start to go wrong with the processes we have in place, what can we do with autonomous systems to kind of fix that? So we've got our speakers. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 speakers who are each going to share a talk for about 10 minutes. We'll have time for Q&A at the end. And speakers, 10 minutes. So if you start to go over 10 minutes, we're going to do the old wrap it up and I'll start muscling you over to the next person because we don't want anyone to get shortchanged. Just one note before we begin, there's a giant slide deck here and you know you're working with roboticists when the average PowerPoint size is like over a gigabyte. So some of these guys have amazing 4K videos. If they don't show up, they might just talk about what the video would look like and we'll post the slides later and y'all can take a look. But in the interest of time, we might not do too much troubleshooting. So without further ado, I want to kick things off to our first panelist. I want to kick things off to Sean, connecting virtually. Sean.
Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me all right? Testing?
Yeah, you sound good, buddy.
Excellent. Thank you. Yeah, it's nearly morning here. It's about a few minutes to midnight. I thought I'd just start. So I'm trying to tie this together with, I guess, terrestrial perspectives. But what I'm going to talk to you about is really how a company. So Woodside is an energy company. And if those who aren't aware, we've got a Space Act agreement with NASA where our our robotics team works with the Dexterous robotics team at JSC. So we are on a pursuit for integrated operations. And what that involves is first step being remote operations, and then integrated operations is essentially trying to connect our entire value chain together, where our operating assets out in the field are able to connect really well with our headquarters and be able to connect our satellite assets that are offshore and onshore back to our central business. I'm going to try and do this with a little bit of storytelling because I know there's a lot of technical people in the room, but I guess I'll try and mix the things up to explain. One, the integrated operations side first, and then I'll tie into how that has enabled our robotics perspectives to be deployed onto our sites, which includes remote operations as well. With that, get someone to move slide forward, please. Yeah. Usual disclaimers that we've got to say about the data that's in it. Next one, please. This is actually, so for those who don't know, so I guess the First Nations people in Australia, the Aboriginal people have kind of Indigenous artwork, and we use that to sort of kind of tell the story here. So I won't go into detail because it's kind of a little bit too difficult to explain over the chasm, but essentially what this story is about is we've got assets there about 1,500 kilometers apart that we're doing remote operations from and to, and the left-hand side of the artwork represents the sort of northern part of Western Australia. The right-hand side represents the southern part of Western Australia, and the central part is where our headquarters is. And long story short is essentially there's history with all the animals and journey lines, etc. But what we're trying to say is the whole idea of integrated operations is trying to bring our sites together with our headquarters and try and make magic happen. So I'll talk to that, like how that magic happens in a bit. But the first is the why. If I can get next slide, please. The reason why we do it, and I thought it's just probably worthwhile just explaining why we do this, is because there's increasing complexity. Now, there's lots of stuff going on in this slide, but essentially for an asset like our liquefied natural gas plant, it's in the north of Western Australia, started with essentially 2 products, and now we've got 5 different products where it's not just shipped LNG or shipped condensate. We've also got domestic gas, truck LNG, an interconnector that connects one gas plant to the other, and more complexity that's arising. So all of these products have different customers at different times of the day, and different, even though they're the same molecule, they have an incredible amount of commercial and technical complexity. So that's kind of just gives you the reason why we want to push forward to having integrated operations and be able to operate all of our different plants from a central location. Slide forward, please. And the 3 sort of pillars, the complexity, we want to make quick and effective decision making. That's why we want to have data in real time, lots of effective data pushed down to the right decision levels, low enough in the organization such we don't have to go through a lot of churn. And then remote operations obviously gives us an opportunity for diversifying the workforce as well. Slide forward, please. This is just saying how we did it. I won't talk to great detail here, but essentially from 2012, when the asset started up, to when we are now, we've moved more and more of our workforce from the site area back into our central work center. The support center being like planning, all the asset leadership, moved in 2015. We built a pilot lab which trialed out remote operations, and you can see it's kind of rustic, minimum viable product type in that photo up the top there. And then last year we built our Pluto Remote Operating Center, which is our center from which we are now operating all of our plant from, like I said, 1,500 kilometers away, and where we've been able to now establish our central hall for teleoperated and autonomous robotics. Slide forward, please. This slide's got a bit of animation, but I'm not going to go into detail. This is the slide we usually go through with the regulators around how we manage our risks. But I'll, if anyone's got questions on this later, I'll run through it. So if you can just tap through until we get to the next slide, please. Essentially what it's saying is there's controls in place for us to manage our risks. And we do it with incredible people. Another slide forward, please. Starting to get to where everyone's going to be interested in, I guess, what we found with having remote operations, what the value is, why the why we said was why we had to. This is what we're seeing as benefits. So when you've got a remote operating center, not only are you able to manage your assets all centrally from one location, but you increase corporate connections. So where our sites were just sort of operating by themselves, we now have access to subject matter experts, collaboration with our marketing, trading, and shipping, allowing us to make fast decisions and maximize profit, which is at the end of the day for an energy company, that's what we want to try and do. We've also had training benefits, improving our training simulators with accuracy and efficiency, therefore being able to get faster graduates through by the access of subject matter experts as well. We found, can't deny it, there's also an improvement to family and lifestyle. Having a remote center now, we've got our operators that are able to live and work in the city, not at the remote site, so they're able to go home every night and be with their families, which is a much greater improvement for mental health. And the bit which I want to really get to is the improvements that we've done in the digital and technology space. So if we move forward to the next slide, I'll talk through the robotics developments that have come through. The first, I probably will skip this. This is probably more it's a video. So this is where the 4K videos come into play. Hopefully they go through. If not, I'll just explain what they are. The first video is a digital twin. So essentially, in order for us to be able to visualize all of the information that's coming back from the plant, including the data that's being obtained from our mobile sensors, as well as robotics, as well as our fixed static sensors, we need a place for it to be centralized so that we can access it. So the first one, if we forward to the next slide and hit this, just gives you an example of how a digital twin looks like. And hit go on this. I'll see if the video works. So this just shows you the plant, top view of what the plant looks like. You can access all the permits, where the data comes from, static cameras, etc. All the central location. Click links, and you can see where the information comes from. If you want to find pieces of equipment, you can put in the functional location, get to the piece of equipment, and get all of the engineering data that's available there. So P&ID type drawings and any kind of data that comes off the distributed control system, and any engineering additional data, as well as whatever our localized robots have been taking of images and photos. This just shows you how our operators can actually do their daily tasks, and we can actually push the information through the field operators via mobile apps. So all of it's centralized into one user interface. This is where the line managers can check where the tasks are being done. This is the digital twin, if you like, the 3D model. You can actually navigate through the system and find pieces of equipment, get the information, get the data, and able to operate or acquire information for any robotic devices that you've got in the field. And then there's the usual sort of dashboards. For us, it's useful having shipping dashboards. This is our value chain dashboard, and the one that's going to come up is like our alarm dashboards. Next slide, please. So these next videos show you what we've been doing in terms of robotic development. So the first one, if we go to the next slide, this hit go on this, and I'll talk as it goes. So this is the teleoperated robot on one of our offshore platforms. So it's, a platform that's not just the 1500 k's away, but add another 200 k's offshore. And we teleoperated this robot. So it's fairly basic, yeah, clear path.
I just remote operated a robot on the North Rankin complex. So North Rankin is about 2,000 kilometres away from Woodside Plaza and 130 kilometres out in the ocean. It exceeded my expectations. I had a 30-second primer on how to use the robot before we actually got into it.
So that's he was the general manager. He's now the asset manager for Pluto. Yeah, like we said, didn't give any pre-training. We're able to get him in to teleoperate this robot. So so what I guess the value of this is the robot's able to travel around the plant. So we're minimizing the tasks that are either high risk or mundane. So if we're going to try and acquire information from areas in which you would otherwise need confined space or high risk permits, we're able to now do that remotely. And I guess this is just showing what the capability is, and this is in the space of doing it in a teleoperated sense.
Hey, Sean, just in the interest of time, can you get to some concluding thoughts?
Sure. So if we skip forward, this one's showing you it's the Boston Dynamics spot. I was doing. To show you that this is autonomous mode, so autonomous robotics, doing inspections using on the plant using the robot. And if we skip forward to the next one, I'll just show. And this is us doing drone inspections using drone-in-a-box solutions. So it's just showing you, and again, using the Fuse interface, we're able to do this. Essentially, we're able to. Apologies for the. We're enabling the video, enabling the drone and the box solution, so you can see us deploying it. And this just shows you what the different types of capabilities that we're doing in robotics to enable us to get data and get pushed back to central location. Please push forward the slide, please. Yeah, so concluding remarks. When we're doing, I guess, a program, we need to have a why, and for us, this complexity, decision-making, diversity, how we did it with stage milestones, a good team and managing our risk. And then the benefits obviously are what I explained, including what we're able to do with technology. So apologies for going over a little, but thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Sean. That was an awesome terrestrial overview. Yeah, we can clap. That's fine. Sure. Great. Excellent. Moving along to our next panelist, Nick Payne from Apptronic. You can drive the deck with that.
Okay, sure. It's great to be here today. So my name is Nick. I'm part of a company called Apptronic. We're a robotics company out of Austin, Texas. Been around for about 7 years. And today I'm going to talk a little bit about our latest robot, Apollo, which has roots back into some NASA work we did about a decade ago on the Valkyrie humanoid robot. So the work that we do stemmed from DARPA. Here's a slide of various DARPA challenges over the years and representing the time lag from DARPA challenge to commercial product or company being created from that challenge. For us, there was a DARPA robotics challenge back in 2013, 2014 timeframe. And we can see about a decade later, similar to the autonomous driving challenge, there's a lot of activity in the space of humanoid robotics this past few years. So this next slide shows some of the work building that Valkyrie robot. We were part of a team of about 50 people, made up both from NASA engineers, but also academia from various institutions. And the mission was to create a humanoid robot that could go into a disaster scenario and affect change to mitigate damage in the environment. So there's a lot of work here on built on both the Robonaut historical work, but really thinking about how do you build a capable robotic platform that can both have the mobility to go into human spaces and also the manipulation capabilities to interact with the environment in those situations. So that was 10 years ago. There's been a lot of technological advancement since then. There's been a lot of hardware and system design progression. There's been proofs of new ways to design robots and how to control them. There's been new sensors that have become made available largely in the stereo vision space. Compute has continued its evolution of smaller, faster, and more power efficient. There's been a ton of algorithmic advancement as well, really in the realm of leveraging these compute resources for real-time and reactive control methodologies, coupled with reinforcement learning and some of the wave of AI that's been making rapid progression. And then as well, I think we've also understood on the terrestrial side some viable use cases. There's a lot of demand out there today for, there's a huge labor shortage, for example, and these are the types of applications that we're starting with here on Earth before kind of proving out the technology to go out into extraterrestrial applications. And finally, there's been a lot of advancement in terms of public perception. I think today there's much more awareness and excitement around these types of systems for them to become commercially viable prior to being used in space. So as a company, we've, like I said, been around for about 7 years, and we've been working on this problem of humanoid robots for that whole time. This is a slide showing some of our past work, starting with the NASA Valkyrie robot in 2013, and then iterating slowly through new technology solutions, new actuation approaches, to culminate in our most recent robot, which is Apollo on the right. These next few slides just show some of that technology progression over the years. And as the focus of this panel, this is an example of using teleoperation to have a one-to-one connection between a human and a robot. So these videos are showing a robot being controlled by a human directly. You can see in that top left image. But at the same time, and as you can see in the top right, these systems are safe for humans to be around so they can coexist in the same space, which is a deviation from how robots have been typically used in industry. On the locomotion front, we've been focused on this problem for a long time. Historically, robots have been able to walk for maybe multiple decades, but they've been slow and non-robust. So we've really been thinking about how do we solve this system challenge of creating a fast and robust locomotion platform that's able to navigate both flat terrain, but also outdoor environments and unstructured terrain. Through this iteration of system design, we've learned a lot about how to design these types of robots. This is a picture showing a number of different actuation technologies that we've explored to investigate the best approaches to solve these problems. So today, looking forward, we're initially focused on commercial applications in the terrestrial space, and these are the remaining challenges that we have to conquer to make this a reality. So I'll go through each of these. First of all is scalability and cost. Historically, robots have been expensive, and from a return on investment standpoint, this is a key thing for us to focus on. So I think one thing to think about is there's been a lot of work that we've put into design for manufacturing and assembly, and I think there's this parallel that can be made of should robots mirror the automotive manufacturing process, or should they mirror more kind of the traditional industrial robotic arm manufacturing process? Purely from a cost of raw materials, from a volume and weight standpoint, these types of systems are about 25 times lighter weight than an automobile. So I think you can make the argument that they should be 25 times cheaper, assuming different manufacturing methods and volumes. So as a proof point of that, we've designed this latest robot actually during COVID, and with all the constraints of the supply chain, and thinking about how do we think about ensuring that we have multi-source vendors and no single supply chain points of failure. And on the system, our raw material costs are under $1,000 from a raw weight of metal and volume perspective. clearly there's a lot of, this is sort of the asymptotic minimum for cost, but I think there's a compelling way to get to a cost-effective system for this type of robot. This is the Apollo design. It's a unique mechanical and system design. It's built using linear actuators, which is a departure from, I think, many other conventional approaches to designing these types of robots. It's got about 30 degrees of freedom. So this gives it the same kind of workspace and payload as kind of the OSHA level standards for humans doing labor today. From a public adoption standpoint, this is something that we think a lot about. And so we really think about how do we design a system that, you know, could be encountered by a child in the, you know, a market or a supermarket and have it not be, you know, scary or intimidating. And so a lot of work with kind of user interface and user experience to drive towards this. Clearly, there's going to be safety standards here as well that will play a large role as well. Next slide. Third, on proof of utility, this is really, you know, can we make a humanoid robot that seems like a complicated system, but be economically feasible to do real work in the world? So the way that we think about this is we're basically moving across the spectrum of moving robots from where they currently exist in structured applications into the unstructured applications here along this spectrum. So we're kind of incrementing towards robots that can have more range of operations and mobility and dexterous manipulation capability in unstructured environments. The kind of minimum viable product, which in its own right is an interesting question, you know, what does a minimum viable humanoid robot look like? We've identified kind of the next iteration or the next step in unstructured applications in warehousing and logistics. So we're looking at moving around boxes and totes and manufacturing and logistics operations, which I think, you know, the general question of logistics and infrastructure, as we're talking about in this conference, applies both in terrestrial and extraterrestrial applications. From a technology standpoint, the things that you need to be able to, the skills that you need to have to perform these tasks are basically to be able to walk around, to locomote in your environment, move from point A to point B. So we've been doing a lot of work, like I said, over the years, but in particular on this robot to achieve both fast and robust locomotion capability. And then beyond that, on the manipulation front, the ability to manipulate your environment, in this case, a box, is of critical importance as well. This video is showing an autonomous capability to perceive an object and then create a grasp that's able to pick that object and interact with it. And then in closing, you know, why humanoid? The whole purpose of this is kind of the iPhone of robots. We'd like to create systems, and the way you get to scale and cost is creating a single platform, a single hardware platform that has a wide range of applications and utility. So it's a single robot with, you know, many applications, a single API with thousands of developers. This is kind of the long-term goal that we're shooting towards. And eventually, you know, this technology starts on Earth, but we're working with NASA to prove this out on Earth first to enable this technology for space missions in the future. Thank you.
Thanks. So a bunch of good questions coming in the Slido. We're not going to be able to address them just in the interest of time. So I'm going to encourage everyone to mob the speakers when we get done before we go to lunch. Just I see them coming in, but I want to make sure we get done on time. So thank you, Nick. I know he had to skip some slides, including one where he's going to talk about donating robots to community colleges. So I appreciate it. But a good segue, right? His closing thought about this is what we're doing on Earth. Let's go to the moon. I think our next panelist is going to talk a lot more about what it looks like to prepare for the lunar surface. So turning things over to Toyotaka. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Toyotaka TK. I'm the Chief Technology Officer at GitHub. Gitai is a space robotics startup aiming to provide safe and affordable means of labor in space. So what you can see here is an example of some of our activities that we've been making. So of course, the difficulty of space industry is developing something that works in the space environment, but we believe that repetitive experiment on ground is the way to improve the robotic capability. And these are some examples. We've started from samplings, exploration experiments, and leading to welding, tightening screws, using robots to pull a dolly, exchanging flat or broken tires, or construction activities. Here are some examples. So we're based in Los Angeles, California, and this is our facility. So we do the design, manufacturing, and testing, the total procedure in our office. Oops. Oops, sorry. So we raised 45 million as a Series B extension round last August to accelerate our lunar exploration activities. So I'm really happy to be here to be able to share what we've been working on recently. Talking a little more about Gitai, our strength is in vertically integrated design, in-house design. So we do mechanical design, design of avionics and software, everything in-house, so that we can do the vertical integration and do scrap and build kind of development. So once we build the robot, we take them out to the field, like the Death Valley or Mojave, the Death Valley, and test the whole system out. The best way to improve our technology is, I believe, to develop a flight model. So we've been having tech demos in space all the time. We'll be launching our dual arm robotic arm to ISS in a few months. The robotic arm will be mounted outside Bishop Airlock for 6 months, and it will be conducting various on-orbit servicing operations. Through this demonstration, our technology readiness level will be 7. So all the hardwares that we develop will be based on TRL7 technologies. And currently, we're looking for how to conduct a technology demonstration on the surface of the moon. Oh, here are some examples of the facilities we have in-house. Let's skip it. This is the product that we are developing. It's called the Inchworm robot. So it's a 7 degrees of freedom robotic arm with tool changers attached on both ends of the robotic arm. Around the tool changer, it has cameras, LEDs, charging pads, and as an interface. So it's about 2 meters long with 60 kilograms in mass. With its tool changer, so we can walk around, use tools, and do various operations. So we got to this. We believe that the Inchworm form factor is best, is the best solution that we can provide to various business domains, including the commercial space station, on-orbit servicing, or lunar explorations. Through conducting various customer projects and technology demonstrations, we got to this conclusion. Looking at various space projects, it always starts from lots of design reviews, SSR, SDR, PDR, CDRs, and lots of paperwork, pros and cons. But given the decrease in the launch fees and the world changing so fast and lots of unknowns until you actually make things, we think we don't think that going through that kind of process for all kind of mission doesn't really make sense. So we define this as a product so that we can provide this to all the customers, all various customer missions. So, yeah. Until we got to that form factor of the end-to-end product, we did various projects. We built 8 degrees of freedom robotic arms. We did humanoid type robotic arms, robots, and various other types, and got to that conclusion. Here's an example of what we've of our past projects with customers and tech demos. So in order to make the end-to-end robot ready for the lunar environment, we've been putting quite a lot of resource recently. So some of here are some examples of what we've been updating, starting from adding dust seals, and around the end effector, we've been adding dust repellent coatings, dust tolerant mechanism, wireless charging. Other than that, for example, for software, we've been updating our computer vision algorithms using deep learnings to make the to improve the accuracy in a lunar environment. Or we've been dipping our hardware in liquid nitrogen to see if our hardware will survive the night. So thanks to our funding this year, we've been accelerating our activities and for the lunar activities. And now we have a lunar regolith simulant dirty chamber in our office so that we can test our hardware every day. So we put our end-to-end robot together with our prototype of the rover inside, and we're testing it out every day. If you're interested, we're always happy to have you give you a tour. Okay, so today I want to share one of the demonstration activities we did in our office. So it's a collaborative work using one rover and multiple end-to-end robots. So using a single robot wouldn't be a solution to do a large construction at the surface of the moon. We believe that we need to have tens and hundreds of robotic solutions, workforce, to be able to achieve that kind of challenge. And this is one example that we did. So a rover is used as a logistics and end-to-end collaborating to carry modules to construct a large tower. Looking at how robots are used in the space industry, it's mainly used for repetitive tasks such as inspection and maintenance, but we want to change this. I think we can do more with robots and such as construction works, and this is how we want to achieve this. And we want to change how people think of robots and push forward the boundaries of what robots can do to accelerate the development of lunar construction. It's a little bit fast, but that's it for my talk.
That's great.
Thank you.
Thank you, TK.
Thank you.
TK gets us back on track to go to lunch on time. So thank you so much. Super interesting. The program says we're going to hear from Ross at Lockheed Martin, but a little switcheroo. We're going to hear from Ross's colleague, Tim, next to tell us more about what they're working on. So Tim?
Great, thank you. So I'm going to talk about lunar infrastructure and in particular mobility and what we're doing at Lockheed Martin. And I'm pretty excited to be on this panel. There's some neat stuff that we just saw. I'm thinking about all kinds of different ideas about how we apply this terrestrial stuff to the moon. And an energy plant on Earth, that's an ISRU plant on the moon. A humanoid robot, that would be excellent. I can imagine EVAs where there's a person and a helper. At one moment it's a lunar scientist like Clive with you, and the next moment it's the engineer who designed the ISRU plant that you're building. And then I think inchworm could be just throughout, everywhere. There'd be an inchworm helping you out. So we've been working in the space of autonomy and telerobotics for a while. We've actually done some research at the University of Colorado with Jack Burns on telerobotics. And from the moon, by the time you add up the speed of light delays, you add up the system delays, you're not, from a telerobotics perspective, you're not like real-time driving something. But that capability, especially if it's integrated with an autonomous system, I think that mixture really works well, where the system is working autonomously and hey, there's a problem, or there's a really complex thing, human drops in, takes care of it, comes back out. And that human could be on Earth, could be at the gateway, and then of course thinking to Mars, it could be in Mars orbit. And that mixture of control modes, I think, is going to be the way we do things. And we're doing similar things right now. Like on the Orion spacecraft, it can be commanded from the ground. The crew can grab the stick and fly it. There's automated sequences and fault management, and all of that is happening at the same time. And that's what I imagine on the lunar surface, is that we'll have the mixture of humans and robots working together, seamlessly coming out, in and out on what they need to do. So from a Lockheed perspective and from an infrastructure perspective, now kind of zooming out, big picture, our goal in working infrastructure is to reduce the barrier of entry for others to be able to be on the moon. So we want to work on the infrastructure that then scales, and then users like all of these great companies can be operating on the moon, and we can provide the power, we can move them around. And as part of a whole economy. So not just one or two companies, but a whole diversity of companies providing infrastructure on the moon. And we're particularly focused on developing a water-based, nuclear-enabled cislunar economy. I'll unpack that a little bit. We're a big fan of water, and in particular hydrogen, from the efficiency point of view, whether it's chemical propulsion or now moving into nuclear thermal propulsion. And nuclear enabled. So not just propulsion providing high efficiency, high thrust, but providing constant power on the surface of the moon. That's going to solve a lot of problems. And then an economy, right? It's every space dollar is spent on Earth. And when we talk about a cislunar economy, that's really, we're intending to expand Earth's economy to the moon, and have those integrated. So that's the long-term vision. There's a lot of different things that are part of that vision that we're working on. I'll point out a couple. Parsec is our communications, position, navigation, and timing service. That's being offered by Crescent, our lunar infrastructure services company. We're super excited for Crescent to be picked for Luna 10. I think you were picked for Luna 10 as well. That's going to be a great program. So ISRU, making that propellant, that needs a lot of power. We're working on human habitation. You might have seen our inflatable habitat burst tests, which are super fun to run. And then transportation and logistics. But right at the center of it is surface mobility. And when we talk about building infrastructure, we need to have something that is capable to be able to be building these big things on the moon. So our lunar mobility vehicle can do far side permanently shadowed operations. It's got a large amount of range, a large amount of payload capability in order to do all of the things that we really need to do. And what we're imagining when we think about mobility on the surface is, again, a big diversity. Very small rovers. I didn't think about walking things, but now I need to think about walking things on the surface. Medium class things, that move crew around, that can do data, can do prospecting for resources, and can do infrastructure deployments sort of at a small scale. And then as we keep moving forward, we'll need even larger systems. Now we're thinking about pressurized rovers and dump trucks to move regolith and deliver it to the ISRU plant. So that's where we're headed. And I think as we build that infrastructure, we need to keep in mind the long-term future here that we're building. I walked over from the hotel and there was a coal train going over, 150-year-old rail lines. But it was massive, and it had engines in the middle of it, capabilities that, remote operation enable now here in the 21st century. So, based upon the works of the other panelists, we've got the technology now. It's time to be on the surface, building towards this economy. So thank you.
Great. So we have one more talk. Our minders have asked me to issue a correction. They said I accidentally got everyone's hopes up that lunch was next. We have breakout sessions next and then lunch. So stomachs will have to rumble a little bit longer. But our last speaker from JPL, virtual speaker, Ryan McCormick. Ryan, take it away.
Hi, everyone. I'm Ryan McCormick, and I'm the PI for the Cold Operable Lunar Deployable Arm, or Cold Arm. In the room, you have Andrew Gray from JPL or Mike Baba if you need to find someone to talk to while you're there. Next slide, please. So the Cold Arm project is funded by the Lunar Surface Innovation Initiative, and it's managed through STMD's Game Changing Development Program. It was originally funded as a ground demonstration with potential pathway to a lunar tech demo in CLIPS. The scope was increased to include lander integration and a surface operations for a lunar tech demo. It was pre-manifested on CP12 to Schrodinger. We got to about the final part of the interface document process. We were demanifested due to budget issues, but the primary focus was to demonstrate operation of a cryogenic capable manipulator on the lunar surface. Next slide, please. So for the arm, we have an industrial partner in Motive Space Systems. So the arm itself, it looks very similar to the Phoenix or Insight arms. So it's 4 degrees of freedom. It's about 2 meters in length. The initial end effector concept has a scoop with geotechnical property features that we collaborated with GRC, KSC, and Marshall on. That is 3D printed, and it has about 40 newtons of tip force. The big innovation, though, is the cold operability. So right now, the Mars rovers on Mars, they have to wait to a certain time of day to even start heating up the actuators. Then they can spend a couple hours heating up actuators before they can get going, also using up to 30% of discretionary budget on board just to start going. But the big innovation here is the arm can operate without heaters. So you don't have these restrictions of having to wait till daytime or having to use energy to do heaters or even waiting for them to heat up. You can just go at all times of day or night. So there's bulk metallic glass actuators and harmonic flex splines in each of the robotic joints. And there's also cold motor controllers, which can operate down around 100 Kelvin. There is a worm avionics box on there, which leverages a lot of the Mars helicopter work. So it has their avionics, their cameras, and then there's also a cryogenic force torque sensor located at the wrist, which is very useful for autonomy and fault recovery. Next slide, please. So what we're trying to do a lunar tech demo so that we can use these technologies for the future, such as the bulk metallic glass actuators, the cold motor controllers, or cryogenic force torque sensors. So these would be applicable more than just arms, but also just various mechanisms, rovers, or gimbals. Also, the geotechnical property measurement could be good for future landers or rovers or ISU or humans. Also in the decadal, it does call out exploring bulk metallic glass actuators to remove the heaters. And then there are a number of potential missions from the decadal that we think this technology is enabling for. Next slide, please. So the motor controllers, these are made by Motive Space Systems. They were originally developed under an SBIR phase 1 and 2. The more standard space rated temperature ranges have been demonstrated both on a JPL mission, and then they're in production for Dream Chaser and Roman Space Telescope CGI controllers. And the primary difference is that between the DACs and the Bravo, which is the commercial space one, is just the DC to DC converter, which enables you to work at these cryogenic temperatures. And we have demonstrated these in TVAC and through vibration testing. Next slide, please. For the bulk metallic glass gears, instead of using a crystalline structure, it is an amorphous metal. So it's metal, but it's formed like a glass. And because of this amorphous structure, you have much better wear properties. So you can move away from wet lubricants and the need for heaters. So they're both a gear motor with the planetary, and then there's also a harmonic flex spline system. Next slide, please. So for testing the planetary gear motor, the EDU configuration saw 10 million revs at ambient and 1.5 million revs below 100K. And the EM FM configuration did just complete live testing for cold arm tech demo. So that was successful. For the strain wave gears, we did complete live testing on it. And then there's also other environmental testing that we did, as you can see over here. There's a nice cryogenic dyno at SwampWorks down at KSC that we used for the life testing. We did submerge the gear motor in liquid nitrogen, and we were still able to operate it. And we've also completed cryogenic shock testing on the gear motors. Next slide, please. We did build up an EM system. So it was assembled at Motive. We had a Lunar Advanced Robotics lab at JPL, which used GRC3 simulant, which is the closest for geotechnical properties. We had it on a Flowtron, so we could simulate being on the top deck or bottom deck of different landers and different heights. We had EGSE racks to simulate the power and comms we would receive from a Eclipse lander. We had an ops station where we could actually simulate our operations. And the test we did here for the geotechnical property, where we did a large pressure sinkage test where we pushed a flat face into the ground. We did some trenching and angle of repose testing, and also some shear testing with the scoop. Next slide, please. We did set up ops tools, so we were able to operate it similar to how we operate robots on Mars right now. So we use the Mars rover tool, which we can take images and get all sorts of characteristics and make digital elevation maps with them to help with our forward planning. And then we used an RSVP Light Nest Sim tool. So this lets us simulate our procedures ahead of time going through the software, and we can visualize them with the terrain mesh to make sure the robot is going to do what we think we want it to do. And we can edit the procedures and send command sequences to the system. So again, this is very similar to how we operate Mars rovers right now. Next slide, please. So here's a quick video of doing a trenching operation and angle of repose testing. So this was of interest to the some of the scientists we are working with to understand geotechnical properties for future engineering efforts. So we would go and just scoop, create a trench, and then dump it out in a pile to better understand angle of repose. And we're also measuring loads through the force torque sensor to better understand the various forces required to get through the soil. You go to the next slide, please. So ongoing work for the bulk top glass, we just finished up the life testing for it. We are doing mechanical and physical property coupons for the materials themselves. We're working on a material spec with specification minimum allowables. We're publication, design, fabrication, and inspection guidelines, recommendations, and then publishing the test data. For cold arm, we recently completed the DACY plus actuator testing and TVAC, dust seal testing, system level vibe. We are about to start system level cryogenic TVAC testing here in the next couple of weeks. And then another effort, though, is to do a future mission study. So we've shown sufficient life for lunar tech demo. We want to kind of see where we are with future missions. So if you have any mission concepts, feel free to come talk to us, and we'll try to get those included in the study. And we are going to do a redesign and rebuild and retest of the actuators for these future missions. In parallel, we are working with Lockheed Martin on an autonomy collaboration. If you go to the next slide. So this is causal and reinforced learning, or CARL. So this is through a cold tech. And so this is taking the CARL system and then using cold arm as a use case for it. So this work is still ongoing. All right. Thank you very much.
All right, guys. So thank you so much. I've been informed we're going to push back the start of the breakout just a couple minutes. So we are going to do some questions because there's so many. I'm like watching them flood in on my phone and we can't do all of them. So there's a couple that apply to the whole panel that I want to ask. So Sean, if you're still around, Ryan, if y'all can jump back on. Sean didn't go to bed yet, but pretty soon. But we'll forward the questions to the individual speakers. So if you had a question specifically about inchworm, we'll see if TK can post it a little bit later. So we'll try and make sure they all get addressed. But one that I have for almost everyone is a question for the panel, which was specifically, how well for everyone here do you think your robots could and will need to work together on the surface of the moon? So we're not just going to have one company's robots up there doing their thing. Everyone's going to have to kind of work together. What does that ecosystem look like? And how are you guys thinking about that at this stage? Zoom panelists, welcome to answer. In-person panelists. Maybe Tim, it seems like Lockheed's got a lot of thoughts on the overall ecosystem.
Sure, yeah, and I think that the ability to work together and the ability to apply what each robot is best at, I think is how I would imagine it. And I think we do need to get to a point also where some really minimal standards are defined. Like, and I think of like the International Space Station grapple fixture, that the Canadian robot, you know, those should be everywhere so that robots can pick up things and move things. And then I think the other thing we got to think about is that everything's going to be very mobile. So how do we move these things around, and not with one particular rover, but with all of the rovers?
Excellent. Anyone else? Any thoughts on that?
I think there's probably two ways to look at this. One is kind of more systemic if you want to go a structured approach, and I guess we're looking at it because we've got lots of different mobile devices, and so from different product streams. So you've got spots, you've got drones, we've got ClearPath, and so we're looking at doing it integrated into a system. And that's kind of your structured approach. The other way to do it is the unstructured approach, is where you'd go, each robot's got its own collision avoidance, and so you can throw a big mess of them there, and you know they're not going to interact with each other in a negative manner, but that probably isn't as well thought out. So depending on your use case, if it's just say, you know, a mission on the moon for ISRU where you're trying to collect regolith and put it, you know, somewhere else, any robots that are working sort of collaboratively on that, you probably want to have a structured approach where they each know what their systems are and where their limits are. But then otherwise, if you've got multiple things happening across, you know, kind of a matrix of activity, you might want to have just those basic rule sets for kind of avoidance around them. But yeah, good point.
Yeah, and Sean, you talked about digital twins, and I think that's to be able to have everybody's twin in a simulation environment and run it on the ground first. I think that would be key too.
Yeah, it's always nice to find those problems in simulation before you're a couple of 1,000 miles away trying to troubleshoot, right? Yeah. Hey, another great question came in, and maybe this one targeted towards Ryan and TK. So you guys are going to have some pretty cool robots working on the moon. I'm particularly interested in this question at the community college doing workforce development. What happens when they break down or something goes wrong? I know my students would love to be lunar robotics technicians, but maybe that's not practical right out of the gate. What have you guys been thinking about so far for maintenance and repair?
So in the traditional space industry, I think doing lots of design reviews and building something that's reliable, redundant was the approach that everyone has been taking. But developing something that's redundant, that has redundant configuration is always complex and takes time to develop. So we don't really think improving the reliability is the solution, but like sending multiple robots could be a solution. So make a robot that's not redundant, but send two robots together so that if one breaks, we can switch it to another one. Or maybe two robots can work together, but even if one breaks, the other one can still go on working. That's the kind of solution to minimize the development time and the costs from our perspective.
Excellent. Ryan, you guys doing anything?
So there is for Cold Arm itself, since it was originally for a lunar tech demo, we weren't really looking at reserviceability, more just kind of more reliability and robustness of it. There is an effort that's going across NASA that's actually looking at how you would kind of repair robots and switch out modules. There are some efforts looking at that on how you have long sustained infrastructure robots and how you maintain and repair them.
Excellent. Then there's a small question here for Ryan. Ryan, tongue in cheek, but maybe not. Or sorry, for Nick. Excuse me, Nick. So the change in name from Valkyrie to Apollo, is that foreshadowing of anything heading towards the lunar surface?
I guess you could interpret it that way. I think for us, someone mentioned before, Apollo's a moonshot, and for us, it just represents, an ambitious, exciting kind of mission for the team and the company. So that was the motivation behind the name.
Payload's not confirmed yet. Thank you. Last question, I think, and this is another one for the whole panel, is, we always want everything to be controlled and well understood when we're looking at sending things to the moon, but we know that AI is definitely the technology of the moment, right? There's things like GPT and large language models and different, elements that are being applied to swarm robotics. Are any of y'all thinking about preparing for using AI as robots collaborate and having tightly defined parameters, would certainly make it more difficult for robust systems? Are any of you guys using AI approaches on what you're working on?
So we are working AI approaches across many of the things that we do, and that issue of trust is a key one. Normally we just test every possible combination in our simulations and real tests, and then we have complete trust in the system. We won't be able to do that. And so we're working now on how do we develop test campaigns that exercise the system in all the failure cases, and we get an understanding of how it will behave, while knowing that it's not the complete, every box checked kind of thing. And that's to get that new capability. That's what we're going to need to do. So we're figuring it out.
So our company has like over 50% of PhD holders and engineers, and lots of people has degree in computer science, but we don't really believe in AI because in like lunar construction kind of activity, there's launch, landing, avionics, software, mechatronics, like an integration process. And AI is just a portion of that aspect. So like in order to really achieve the great goal of building a moon base or doing some construction, we have to remember that there's no silver bullet to that kind of challenge.
If only, right? So guys, I appreciate it. There's so many questions. I'm just looking, there's like a million of them. We're just not going to be able to get to all of them, but I think there were some that applied to the panel. I tried to grab those. Like I said, if you had a question for a specific panelist, we're going to send them to the panelists and ask them to post them later. But I would like to thank everyone for your time and attention during this session. I'd like to thank our panelists. Let's please give them another round of applause. Their insights were absolutely fantastic. And thank you all for joining us this morning.
Thank you.
I'll turn on this one. Thank you so much, everybody, for your presentations and your content and your feedback. That's very much appreciated. At this point, we have a 5-minute break. However, we want to encourage people to take that break and start heading up to the breakouts. This is your time to give your feedback that will get back to NASA and DARPA and the other agencies. This is valuable time. So we encourage you to take that time up in the breakout rooms. They're going to be starting up in the first 3 breakouts rooms to start. We didn't have quite the participation we thought we would yesterday. So prove us wrong and see if we can need to expand to the other breakouts. So the theme is kind of branching out from this particular panel. Like what is your technology going to need from these guys? And what do we need to start planning for? What does NASA and DARPA need to start planning for? Okay. So remember that lunch tickets will be at the registration. Lunch will be picked up at the ping pong tables, but you cannot pick up your lunch until after breakouts. Okay. So that was determined to be necessary. So have a good break.